The number one thing that blocks emerging adults from Jesus, the church, and community, where their God-given identity can be reinforced, is the subconscious life script that many of them have adopted of expressive individualism. Now, if that sounds like a lot to bite off in one sentence, it's because it is. It's the life script that most people believe of themselves in their 20s, but who could not articulate that they are living out the ideals of expressive individualism. Essentially what happens is they move on from high school and they begin to look at the tenets of their life and identity that was developed in childhood. They pull the house of their identity apart brick by brick and ask the questions, do I still believe this? Is this still how I see myself? And are these bricks of my identity house congruent with my true self? And expressive individualism causes them to want to find how they feel on the inside and begin to express that. If not given community through this time, relationships where their stories can be heard, their struggles known, and their pains expressed, then they'll likely do this in isolation, questioning the existence of God, their faith, and deconstructing their church's beliefs. But with community, they can have a God-given identity reinforced by others who know them, know their story, love them, and can walk with them into the future that God has for them. Banding is more important than it's ever been, largely because most of our relationships are cultivated online, mediated through a screen. Digital communication is good for the exchange of information, but it's not good for the exchange of presence and ultimately the encounter of love. What happens in banding when groups of 3 to 5 people come together on a weekly basis in the same space to encourage one another, pray for each other, and to ask basic questions like, what are the Spirit and Scriptures saying to me? Or what are my struggles and successes? Or are there any secrets that I have that I want to disclose to my closest friends? Answering those questions in the presence of other people allows us to experience their love and ultimately the love of God. It touches our hearts and allows us to be transformed from the inside out into the likeness of Jesus. Banding is especially important for emerging adults because they're answering dozens of disorienting questions that will affect their life for decades to come. I mean, it's in your 20s where you decide, who I'm going to marry, what career I'm going to work, what location I'm going to be in. Now is a moment unlike any other in a life stage that's been before or yet to come, where we need people to help discern what is God doing in my life, helping us to keep accountable to the Scriptures, to make sure that we're growing into the image of God, fulfilling God's will for our life. 20-somethings are skeptical of authority that's detached from relationship. It is true that there is a high level of suspicion around organized religion and church authority. But if you were to walk into a room of college students and ask them who wants a mentor, everyone's going to raise their hand. Why is this? Why is it that college students would be willing to accept what is essentially an authority figure in their lives, but they're skeptical of maybe institutional hierarchy? Well, it's because mentoring comes with relationship. And that's why spiritual parenting is such a potent concept in this moment. It allows emerging adults who are asking dozens of questions about their life and the future, about God and their faith, someone to discover and uncover God's truth alongside. Ultimately, what they're looking for is someone who has an open ear, an open table, and an open heart, who will welcome them in, hear their story, receive the tensions that they're experiencing, absorb maybe some of the barbs or the spines that they're carrying around God and the church, and to be able to reassure them that God is good, God is with them, and that God has a plan and a purpose for their life. Many of these young adults, they're going to be going through their 20s, experiencing it as an identity wilderness, lost and confused about who they are and who God is. Spiritual parents are powerful because they give these young adults a home and a place of belonging in the faith. a sense that I've been through this before and you're going to make it through too. At its best, spiritual parenting allows for the blessing of God the Father over Jesus before his wandering in the wilderness. This is my son, with whom I love, and with whom I'm well pleased. To be spoken over our young adults within our Christian communities, so that they're going from the place of belonging in the community of faith, destined in their wandering to end up in the blessing of God. If the principles of forged young adults in the renewal of the church were to be picked up by church leaders and disciple makers alike, then we would see the trends of loneliness, depression, and anxiety be turned into, for these emerging generation Christians, communities of belonging, where family-like relationships take place. Essentially, the spiritually orphaned would find a family within the church. We would see them come to life as their stories are shared in table spaces, as they learn to practice the spiritual rhythms alongside others. And we would see their lives transform into holiness and to see their gifts activated in service to the church and mission in the world. It would be an impact of renewal in this way, that the lonely would find a home. And the good news for church leaders is that your communities would be that home. In a time where emerging adults are leaving the church, and statistics show by the hundreds of thousands or by the millions, forging family within your church with emerging adults has the power to embed them in the faith, to reinforce their God-given identity, and in many ways would shore up the future of your church with these generations for decades to come.